It's time for episode 88 of The Crisis Show here on Google Hangouts, on YouTube, on Twitter, and wherever else you have this link around the world. Good afternoon from New York City. My name is Rich Klein. I'm president of Rich Klein Crisis Management and founder and host of The Crisis Show. Today we're going to talk about the snowstorm that hit upstate New York, western New York, and in particular the suburbs of Buffalo. And joining me today, we have a new guest. We're pleased to have her. She's an associate professor of communication at Buffalo State, Deborah Silverman from Hamburg, New York. How are you, Deborah?
Hi, good to see you.
Good to see you too, and thanks for joining us on short notice. And I know that you're in Hamburg, New York, and digging out. Have been digging out since November 17th or 18th, I think, was when the storm first hit. So what we're going to talk about, folks, with Deborah is somebody who not only lectures about crisis management and public relations, but someone who lived through the second worst storm, I understand, to hit the Buffalo area. Now, Deborah, just for our viewers' benefit, you're in Hamburg, New York, about 20 miles south of the city of Buffalo. And my understanding from you in our green room was that the city of Buffalo didn't get hit that hard, but the suburbs did. So why don't you open up and just giving us the lay of the land, if you will, and give us a little chronology from the 17th to today, if you could.
Yeah, this is a typical lake effect snowstorm. About half of the Buffalo area did receive the snow, and the northern suburbs and most of the city of Buffalo did not get the snow. So I was literally on Facebook with some friends from the northern suburbs, and they were in shock that they couldn't even believe that we had this much snow. What happened was we had a very narrow band of snow, which was about 15 miles wide. It included the southern parts of the Buffalo area, including communities like Hamburg, Orchard Park, Lackawanna, East Aurora, and then continuing east along Alden was another community that was hit, part of Cheektowaga, but not the Buffalo Airport part of Cheektowaga, Depew, Lancaster. So those communities were all very hard hit by the storm. And South Buffalo, the very southern part of the city of Buffalo. But if you drove into the city itself, the snow was lighter. If you got to the northern parts of the suburbs, such as Amherst and Williamsville, they got very little. You went into Niagara County, Niagara Falls, there was nothing. And in fact, this is what the snowplow removal crews, there were private contractors who came through 2 or 3 days after the storm began. They came into the Hamburg area from Syracuse, and they told me that Rochester didn't get hit, Amherst didn't get hit, even the city of Buffalo wasn't too bad, but they were shocked when they got down towards Hamburg, Orchard Park, the area where I am. So the storm was very narrow in its focus, as many lake effect snowstorms are. This is the second worst in our history, according to the local newspaper, the Buffalo News, because it did not hit the entire Buffalo region. So I guess that's the way to describe the storm itself.
Thank you for that setup. So this storm happened, I guess, about 9 days ago now, right? So yeah. So I know we've been hearing a lot about the potential for flooding. What are you hearing? What are you seeing in the neighborhood about going forward? Is there still a risk of that?
Not as much. Thankfully, no. It was after the storm itself hit, we were all shocked about the snow totals. That was the first thing on people's minds, besides the fact that roofs might collapse. And in fact, that did happen with a lot of buildings, especially businesses. There was a concern that schools might have a roof collapse. Fortunately, no, I don't think too many schools did, but a couple of businesses that I'm aware of in the Hamburg area did have roof collapses. So that was a concern. But then the flooding. But fortunately, as of last night anyways, the Buffalo media are reporting that there's really not much of an issue now with the flooding. It certainly has subsided. It wasn't as bad as we anticipated. And here in my own neighborhood, very, very little. There were a few streets that experienced some minor flooding, but that disappeared as well. So it was mostly the snow removal, and in fact, I believe that a total of 13 people died.
Yes.
Many people died because the snow was so heavy and wet. It would be great to make a snowman with, but it's horrible to shovel. And so if you're not physically, in the best of shape and you're trying to shovel this, that's why the people were getting heart attacks and dying.
So was that the cause of death in most of those 13?
I believe so, yeah. As far as I know, yeah, most of those people did. The other issue is that for snow removal efforts, that also is very difficult because your typical snow plow that the towns might have it couldn't handle that kind of heavy, wet snow. And neither can an ordinary snowblower, because we tried. My snowblower was totally inadequate. So
Wow.
we ended up trying to go to the old-fashioned shoveling. But that was part of the issue. And so one thing that the government officials had to do in their communication efforts was to talk to people about, hey, take it easy, don't overdo it out there, don't overexert yourself. Our county health commissioner was on television many times talking about this to people. You're better off not shoveling, wait till it melts, you know, and that kind of thing.
Thank you for that. So, yeah, and I also tell us also about some. I understand there was some amazing rescues made on the New York State Thruway and the surrounding area. People who were stranded. Just the stories that were coming out the first few hours, right? A lot of people.
There were people that were stranded there for a long time. There was a Niagara University women's basketball team, I think it was, that was on the Thruway for, I think, 30 hours.
Amazing.
And they were out there. Now, what about the Thruway, and this is something I think we still need to learn more about, is that I was wondering why people were even on the Thruway Monday night, because this is the thing, in terms of communication, maybe we can talk about this now, the communication efforts, when I looked at the tactics and who the government officials were trying to reach, let's kind of go over who we had. We had New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, who was, to his credit, right on scene as soon as this occurred. He was probably the lead spokesperson for the entire period of time. Now, whether he flew in and out of Buffalo, I don't know. He probably did. He could have done that. Erie County Executive Mark Poloncarz was the other main person you always saw at the lead of all these communication efforts. Then below that, you had all the different town officials, the town supervisors, highway superintendents, and so forth. So those people were all communicating during the storm. As to who they were trying to reach, they're trying to reach me. They're trying to reach the people that were in Western New York in the storm. They were also trying to reach other people outside of the immediate area who live in the area, but perhaps were thinking, oh, I can drive to Hamburg. Well, no, you couldn't. And beyond that, the news media, the communication between the state and county folks and then the town officials. Those were probably the four groups, I would say, the publics they were trying to reach. They did, to their credit, a lot of communication. Aside from the fact that we could not receive our daily newspaper here, the Buffalo News, there was no way they could deliver it. But as far as the other traditional media, they were outstanding. Radio was wonderful. Television, which I had on nonstop here at my house, and a disclaimer here, my husband works for the NBC affiliate in Buffalo, has worked there for 30 years. So this was the first storm Ed didn't get into Channel 2. But we had the three major affiliates here, which was the NBC affiliate is Channel 2 WGRZ, Channel 4 is the CBS affiliate WIVB, and then Channel 7 is WKBW, that's the ABC affiliate. We also had Time Warner. So those four were out there in that storm doing their utmost.
And they were feeding the national media as well, obviously.
And the national and internet, yeah. You know it's a bad day in Hamburg when you know that Lester Holt is nearby and Dylan Dreyer and Rahema Ellis was down the street from my house. So you know that it's definitely a bad storm. The Weather Channel, whenever I see Jim Cantori or his friends coming into Hamburg, it's like, oh no, another bad winter. But we did see all of those folks, and they were there doing a really good job of reporting as well. So there was a lot of communication in terms of the traditional media, so the radio, the television, the online media, the Buffalo News online website, although I didn't access that, but like I said, the TV stations in particular, I want to talk about them because for I think those of us stranded in our homes for 5 days, as I was,
right.
Seeing nonstop coverage from 4 a.m. until 11:30 p.m. every day. Monday, it was Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday for Channel 2, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for Channels 4 and 7. They did nonstop coverage, and those anchor teams were going, you know, from like 9-hour air shifts, which is really hard to do, 9-10-hour air shifts, and then the evening crew would take over. So the challenge that the TV stations did have was that they couldn't get their employees in because of the travel bans, and this is another thing that was very smart that the county did, and the communities that were impacted. Was those travel bans, because that kept people in their homes, off the streets, so that some snow removal efforts could start. But what that meant for the TV people was that they themselves could not get into work.
Right.
And so you had a number of TV reporters doing live shots from their own homes. Two of them one of them in the Hamburg area, and another woman was in Alden. So those two, Channel 2 tried to get the technical people, like my husband, who's an audio engineer, to get them into work, but they could not go. They would have been arrested if they had gotten on the road. There was a travel ban, and people were getting arrested. So the TV stations, 2 or 3 days into the storm, started sending vans with, you know, the company logo on it out into the storm to drive around to these different communities to pick up employees who were out there in the snow. Some of them were able to get in, others never did. So to their credit, they did very well. In terms of the ratings, now I have to address this. This is a November sweeps. And Channel 2 won the sweeps for last week in terms of its news coverage because, as I said, it was on air the first. It was on the air Tuesday, when I don't think everybody, even in Buffalo, realized how serious the storm was. I have to say that on Tuesday, there were a number of colleges that remained open, including mine. Now, of course, I wasn't going anywhere, but Buffalo State was open. A number of our students who live in the South towns like I do, they couldn't get in. So I don't think it sunk in right away how serious it was down here. But by the end of Tuesday, that had all changed. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, my college was closed, which is very, very rare. SUNY never closes.
That for being a SUNY grad.
They never close. So they closed for 3 days, which was, you know, to their credit, they did it right. But in terms of the traditional media, the government officials were definitely using all the traditional media. But what was interesting this time around is that the online efforts were so much ramped up compared to perhaps a couple of years ago. And we'll talk maybe about some of the websites, but what I found interesting was social media, because I think that where I live, the town of Hamburg Emergency Services Department did a lot of really good stuff with Facebook. They had robocalls, so that the people in these impacted communities were getting a robocall at least once a day, sometimes twice a day, from their town officials saying, hey, there's still a travel ban here, you can't get out, we're plowing today, we expect to have you out tomorrow, whatever it was. And then the same message would be up on the Facebook page for the town of Hamburg Emergency Services, and they were getting a lot of comments up there, so it was a really good way to communicate. The other thing I noticed during the storm was Twitter. Some of you may have seen the hashtag Snowvember, which is the cute name we came up with for the storm, and some of us, like me, were actually out there on Twitter taking our photos of the 7 feet of snow and putting them out there. I noticed that PR Daily actually wrote an article a couple days ago about the use of the hashtag Snowvember. I said, oh, how nice, I contributed. It really was quite a storm, but I think that social media this time around, especially Facebook, really drew people together. And I'm sure, I haven't had a chance to look at all the different Facebook pages, like for the city and so forth, but I know here in my area that it was very well viewed and used by people.
Yeah. So what was your, sorry, we'll talk a little more about social media too, but what was your initial assessment of the officials you're talking about and how they communicated at those press briefings that they must have had? I didn't find all of them online. Got some quick looks. So from the town supervisors, in conjunction with the governor and maybe the mayor of Buffalo, what was your assessment of how they performed in terms of communicating leadership? Because that's what we're talking about here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I'll tell you.
By the way, as you know, a lot of politicians over the years have lost their jobs over snow removal and emergency management.
It still may happen. We don't know. The jury's not in on that one.
Yeah.
As far as I can tell, action is everything, and it's certainly part of a good PR plan is to have action and what the organization's performance is during a particular situation. In this case, I would give the officials high marks in their communication efforts. The news conferences that the governor and the county executive held, they were regular in nature, and I don't remember counting exactly, but there were probably 2 or 3 a day, more certainly in the first 2 or 3 days of the storm, even continuing as late into Sunday. I'm not sure about Monday, but all of that time there were news conferences, and the TV stations, like I said, they were going live anyways. They were just running nonstop news coverage during the storm. Right. So the officials were out there. What the other thing was interesting is that the TV stations did was that they called the town supervisors on a regular basis. For example, the Hamburg town supervisor, and they made like the rounds all during these wall-to-wall nonstop news events. And so you'd hear the town supervisor in my town, for example, on air with Channel 2 or Channel 4 giving the latest updates in our town. And this TV station's made a real good effort to try to do that. So I thought they did a very good job that way. I think the governor made a mistake, and he angered some folks over the weekend when he criticized the National Weather Service for not predicting the storm. I have news for the governor. I knew about that storm 48 hours in advance. I knew about it, I think it was Sunday, and this was expecting, it was going to be Monday into Tuesday. I knew on Sunday afternoon it was going to be bad. And I got on my Buffalo State websites for my 3 courses, and I put a notice up to my students. In case it snows on Tuesday, ... here's what we're going to do. And so all my students knew 2 days in advance that there might not be class. Even on Monday, when I did meet my students in class, I had 2 of my classes Monday, I told them in class, look, we already know the National Weather Service is telling us there's going to be a terrible storm tonight. I probably won't be here Tuesday or Wednesday, so I'm going to give you Wednesday's lecture today. And I did that. I mean, so we were prepared. So for Governor Cuomo to say that we weren't ready was wrong. And in fact, that provoked a large outcry from the meteorologists, from Jim Cantori at the Weather Channel all the way down to the local meteorologists. So it was definitely an issue.
Interesting.
Yeah, so the governor made that mistake, but other than that, I give him a lot of credit for being here. So many times in crisis communication, we hear that the CEO of the company wasn't available, wasn't there, and to his credit, he was.
Yeah, I think Chuck Schumer showed up as well. I think I saw one of the.
Yeah, he did get into town after a couple of days. To their credit, they did a great job. So I was very impressed by what they did, and the county executive likewise was very good too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you make a good point, and we've talked about that a lot on the show, about the importance of, the CEO, the leader, in this case the governor. It's not enough to issue a statement or to make a phone call. You really got to be there with the people going through that crisis, and it's just so important to your reputation. So those of you out there watching in business, that's something you can't overlook. It's a must, particularly in the most serious crisis situations. Doesn't mean you have to show up for every single minor situation, but for things like this where people's safety and lives could be at risk, you got to be there, and you got to be.
Absolutely, and they were. And I think about Twitter too. Now I don't know about the governor, but I do know that Mark Poloncarz, our county executive, was on Twitter a lot during the crisis, tweeting out whatever information he had. So to his credit, I thought he did a very good job too, and I'm sure that Steve Walters did. I haven't had a chance to monitor all this yet because we were kind of shoveling snow in between times.
Right.
But, to their credit, I thought that they did a very good job, and they did have people handling social media, and I know in the town here that, the guy or gal had a sense of humor about it, because towards the end the messages got to be quite amusing. So I thought it was very well done.
Yeah, let's take a look at the Lackawanna County executive here. You just mentioned, I haven't had a chance to look at this, but I don't know if you can read on the screen. I'm just looking down. What I usually do on the show, when we look at social media, we look at some of the tweets at the time of the incident and see where they go. So it clearly looks like a county executive in control. He's showing pictures from the war room, if you will, pictures of the governor, the planning sessions, the meetings, and I'm just scrolling down here a little bit. See what else. He's retweeting stuff like Como did, which is smart because it shows they're working together. That's very good information. They show the plows on the thruway. I think it's really important for our audience to understand that it's a delicate balancing act when you're a government official or a CEO. You want to do 2 things. You want to, as you said earlier correctly, Deborah, you want to show action. And I always say actions lead before the words. So you let people know that you're taking action, about to take action, and then you can announce what you did. Not enough to get up there and say you're doing something and you're an hour behind the crisis, and particularly today, because social media will catch you every time that you fall down on the job, right?
Absolutely.
So I think that the delicate balancing act for a government official like Mark Poloncarz, I'm sorry, I'm pronunciation. The delicate balancing act is to show people you're on top of it, let them and give them the best information you have, and then later on you could shoot your horn and say we did this and this and this. What I found interesting to me, looking at the city of Buffalo Mayor Byron Brown, he seemed to be very self-congratulatory. We did this, we did this. I looked at his Twitter feed and his Facebook page, and it was more about, hey, look at what we did, rather than you need to, speaking to your critical audiences, hey guys, you need to stay off the streets, you need to do this, plow. And they did on Facebook make an attempt to respond, and under his name, respond to some of the individual concerns, such as dialysis patients. There was somebody who was very concerned about that, said, hey, look, you didn't get there for us, and you guys need to coordinate. So there's always going to be that, obviously. You always have room for improvement, and I think it's great that we have social media, that you have government officials who are responsive to their constituency to say, hey, look, we need to, we can do better here. I think the guy who really nailed this better than anybody in the country when there was a crisis, Cory Booker of Newark, and if you look his Twitter, for those of you out there, when he was mayor of Newark, just did a great job of almost too much of micromanaging, but really responding to everybody's concerns when there was a crisis. He's very well known for that. And he's just a good role model for other government officials out there watching. So
in this case, it'd be interesting to see how some of the different town officials, and I haven't had a chance to look at all their Facebook pages or anything, but to see how the residents in these communities, like I said, that were hard hit, East Aurora, Orchard Park. I know what Hamburg has done because I've been on their Facebook page and all that, but seeing how they responded. But I do know that here in my town that a lot of people were watching social media to get that kind of update from government leaders. So, it was a good thing to have, and makes you wonder how we got through the blizzard of '77 or anything before that, without these kinds of commentaries. But I thought it was very helpful.
Yeah, and thanks for that. I also wondered, Deborah, before we wrap up, did you get a sense of because Twitter is really known as the social media, right? So my question is, did you get a sense? And I don't know if you had a chance to look at this. And how government officials, emergency management officials, were using social media throughout the crisis to let people know there was a problem in a certain area and so forth.
That's an interesting point. Now, I don't know if they got down to that level of detail. My criticisms of it is that I know that in my town, for example, that people were wondering when their particular street was going to be plowed, that kind of thing. And maybe it's because the snowplow removal equipment, the heavy front loaders that were necessary, didn't come in until Friday. And so government officials were scrambling just to get the plows deployed.
And where were they coming from, Deborah? Where were they being delivered?
I want to say other parts of New York State and Connecticut, I think, and possibly Ohio.
Yeah, and also I also heard that the New York City Fire Department went up to help shovel out and help people.
Yeah. So there are other parts of New York State, and then Ohio, Connecticut, and the equipment was coming in, and it was, like I said, we didn't get it till Friday morning. Wow. So maybe if there's one thing I would say, I'm not going to give the government officials an A+, but I would give them a B or a B+, because I think that the next time around they ought to think, oh, we better let people know which streets we're going to attack today. They did it at the end of a day. I remember Friday night we got the robocall here from the emergency services saying we got through, the highway superintendent said we only got through about 40% of the streets that we'd hoped to get everybody today. We only got about half, not even half. And he was disappointed. But he didn't say, and on Saturday we are going to attack the following neighborhoods, which I think would have helped allay people's concerns, because by Saturday, what I saw on social media here was a lot of concern about, hey, when's my street going to be plowed? It's been 6 days now, that kind of thing. So, and that I think maybe next time around they ought to sit down as they plan ahead for the next emergency. And I would love to tell you we're never going to get another one, but I know better. Is to say, let's be a little more specific. Let's get a map up there. Let's do something. Let's kind of get the information out. But they're refining it, and I think that they did use, at least in my town and some of the others I saw, social media was a good tool, a real good communication tool. So you just have to refine it.
And as you said correctly, I mean, this year in 2014, and I tell my clients this all the time, in emergency situations, there are companies and organizations that, I'll just put something on my website. Well, your audiences are not going to your website. In the case of the city of Buffalo, I couldn't find anything. They're going to Facebook and Twitter, folks. And in the most serious situations, they're also going to YouTube to see your press conferences if you've had any. So, so for those of you out there watching, who whether you're a government official or business executive and you're concerned about crisis and emergency management, you have to make sure, at the very least, long before a crisis hits, that you have a Facebook and Twitter account set up, ready to go, and make sure that you have somebody who knows something about how to communicate. You don't want just an intern who puts your promotional posts up doing that in emergency. And this is something, Deborah, that I see a lot of my business. I'll say, who's doing his social media? Oh, we have an intern, or we have this first-year graduate. They handle all our social media. Well, in the most serious crisis situations, you want to pull that person off or have them be the junior person, because you really need a communications expert and an experienced person.
And I think what I saw here in my town is that they had either a police officer or perhaps an emergency responder who was working very closely with the highway superintendent and the town supervisor on all the messaging that went out. Because from that level, and like I said, the robocall messaging was identical to the daily update that went on the Facebook page. And then they were responding along the way to individual concerns throughout the day. So somebody who was...
It's really the key. Yeah, that's the difference between, even though we say social media, the same thing, but on the social media in particular, although you can comment on news stories and let people, but on Facebook especially, I think you're right. You know, people's individual concerns or group concerns, that's where it's happening, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And here, you know, they were very good about that. And the person was responding throughout the day and making sure that there was some kind of a response from the town, which was great. But like I said, the only thing I would have faulted them on was the fact that they weren't specific enough about which neighborhoods were going to be plowed first, and, you know, and try to keep that updated throughout the day. That would be something that they would definitely need to think about for the next time around.
Yeah, and just so one other thing I want to add that just came to mind since we were talking about Facebook is back in just about a month ago, Facebook announced this new app that can allow users to tell people that they're safe in emergency. It just came out, and I haven't actually dug into it myself, but it was a big deal, and actually this is going to help the emergency management folks for sure, much like Google has a couple of tools as well. So there are things that, not just for communications with each other, but not just communication between family members, but so emergency management people as well can communicate with those people in a disaster situation. So the tools are ever improving, which is great. People know how to use them and know they're out there, right? So that's so helpful.
Yeah, and I think too that the use of Facebook in this particular storm was especially effective. Looking at, you know, the demographics of social media, it seems like you have a lot of middle-aged people that are gravitating to Facebook. As my 20-year-old college students like to tell me, that their moms and dads are on Facebook now. And that's probably a good thing, because a lot of the homeowners that were here in this area that was affected were on Facebook, or could have been on Facebook. And most of us did not lose our electricity during the storm, which was the other big thing, that we were all safe and warm in our homes. We were trapped, perhaps. I know that, you know, trying to get out your front door and there's 5 feet of snow, obviously it's going to take a while to shovel that out. But we were inside and we were on Facebook, and I think Mom and Dad were using Facebook during the storm and learning more about, you know, what the latest messaging was. So,
yeah. By the way, I find that impressive that you didn't lose power with all that snow on.
We had a harrowing moment on a Wednesday morning.
What's that?
Wednesday morning we had a very harrowing moment, because we had all that 4 feet of snow on Tuesday night, and the heavy wet snow encrusted on the power lines from the street to the house. And for a brief moment Wednesday morning, the power went out here. And I said to my son, this isn't good. And then it came back on. And I kept looking at the line, and it was okay. So for the rest of the storm, we were all right. And then as the day progressed, then it melted off. But yeah, there were, I think, and I'm not sure of the exact numbers, may have been 1,000 or 2,000 customers across the region that did lose power. For those folks, they went to the local fire hall and that kind of thing. But most of us, we were home. And you know, the only big issue was, can you get groceries? Because you'd have to walk through 4 feet of snow to get to your store. There were travel bans. Some of the grocery stores were open, though. And then the other thing was the medicine.
Right.
yeah, getting to the store. I mean, you know, there are lots of moms and dads with little kids that were very worried about, hey, I'm running out of infant formula. I'm running out of basic foods for my family. And then the other piece of it was the prescription medicines. There was one, NBC did a nice feature piece Friday night on my pharmacist who was remained open through the storm. And he said exactly for that reasoning, is that people were running out of their prescriptions, and he knew he had to get there and help them out. And it was that kind of a help the neighbors out. And I hope that the world understands that that's what Buffalo is all about, is in a storm like this, we're known for helping each other, and that's kind of what was shown throughout the storm as well. So.
Great. That's good to hear. That's a nice way to wrap up, too. Yeah. So, yeah, just for our viewers out there, just a couple of quick tips I want to leave our viewers in business and government. You know, this is just an example, Deborah, that as I always say, there are 3 key timelines in a crisis: before, during, and after. And all too often I see in my business, and you probably see as well, that people don't always do their due diligence sufficiently in advance, whether that's the action plan or the communications plan or both. I get the call at the 11th hour. It says, hey, we're in the middle of something, or we haven't planned for this at all. We haven't planned for loss of power or this explosion or this superstorm Sandy or whatever. And then they're deer in headlights, and they have to scramble and have people like me help them catch up. But so what I always tell people is, do your homework. If you live in Buffalo, you know there's going to be a snowstorm. Some of the businesses in the snow belt area, this is it's an easy one. It's an easy one to plan for. You know it's going to happen. As you said earlier, this is not going to be the last, right? And and as we learned in the New York metropolitan area with Superstorm Sandy, that was a surprise to us. So people are learning from that, and whether it's a utility company or a small business or a big business or a government organization or nonprofit, they learn from that. And the hope is with this show and these case studies of like Sandy and now this, that we always improve, because emergency management folks are great about that. They always looking for ways to improve. And for my colleagues on the show, that's what they always talk about. And business executives and others should take note there, that there are always ways to improve your systems. So
absolutely. One final note on this is that Buffalo's responders do have those crisis plans in place. 5 years ago, we had the crash of Continental Flight 3407 here in Buffalo. And 2 weeks after that crash, I convened a panel of public relations specialists and journalists at Buffalo State who were involved in the communication following the crash. And one thing I learned is that there was a crisis for Erie County, including Buffalo. And God forbid you'd have an airline crash. They were prepared. They had just rehearsed a mock airline crash 6 months before this crash occurred. So when it happened, the crisis communication plan went right into effect. And I think in a similar manner that there are crisis communication plans in existence now at the county executive level, certainly, for situations like this one. And although it wasn't 100%, I know that there, like I said, I've discussed a few things today that, I think maybe could be done better next time. I thought overall that the communication was pretty good. As far as so.
And I would just add to that about the plan, and you raise a good point. They're not created to be perfect. It's a fluid document, because you can't plan for everything, and you're going to be throwing curveballs all the time. It's how you adjust to those curveballs. And if you have a good core plan that's easy to understand and people know what they're supposed to do, you've delineated responsibilities to your team members, then you're going to come out better in the end.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think people forget that. They think, oh, everything has to be exact and perfect. No, just get it out. It's like writing, it's like writer's block. If you don't write, you're never going to get there. You have to start somewhere, right? So having some kind of document is better than, and having some kind of training and some kind of rehearsal for, as yours was a great example. They rehearsed for that kind of disaster that made them better, certainly. So, okay, well, thank you so much. This was so. I'm glad we met and got to talk about things that are near and dear to our hearts in this world of PR and crisis management. I appreciate it so much having you, Deborah. For our viewers out there, please use hashtag #TheCrisisShow if you want to comment on anything you heard from Deborah and I. And Deborah, you had another hashtag. Please share that with us again.
Yes, the hashtag for this November storm, Snowvember, SNOWVEMBER.
Wonderful. So yeah.
And photos from that.
Great. So add your comments using those hashtags on Twitter. And we want to wish our viewers in the United States, at least, a happy Thanksgiving, a safe holiday. We're getting a storm here in the city, and I have a house in the Catskills, and we're supposed to be getting 8 or 9 inches. So I don't know if I'm even going to get there. So yeah,
Well, that's enough.
I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
definitely great timing. And the Wednesday, the busiest travel day of the year, another snowstorm, right? So it's going to be
Yeah.
real cold.
Well,
So
hoping it's not as
definitely
bad as
excited.
we had last week.
Right. Well, you have a good holiday, Deb. I'm so glad we met here, and I'd like to do a show in the future with you and the person who introduced us, Rod Smith. Right, Rod? Yeah, did I have that right? Yeah.
Right. Yep. Thank you very much. Thanks for
Thank you,
having me.
Deborah. Great talking to you. See you soon. Thank you, viewers, for watching. Have a nice holiday. Thanks for watching. Bye bye now.
Bye bye.